Hey, what's up guys, TotallyDubbed here, and today I'm doing a video review for the MSI GTX 1050 Ti. This is the 4GB VRAM model. You'd also get the 2GB VRAM model as well. I'd like to thank MSI yet again for sending me a fantastic graphics card for review. Very much appreciated it. Now, in terms of price, you can find it on Amazon.co.uk for around £170. You can also find it at overclockers.co.uk for around the same price. On Amazon USA, you can find the 4GB card for around $170 odd. Prices fluctuate all the time, so do bear that in mind. Now, let's just quickly go into the looks and the design of the card itself. Now, I found the card to look actually quite nice. It's got this red sort of theme to it, as other cards are in the range, such as the 1070 or other similar cards. So you've got a good lighting which comes up from the back. It actually looks like a kind of a dragon of sorts, so it's the back which is lit. And also, due to its twin Forza 6 design, it means that even at 60 centigrade, you got the fans which are completely off, meaning the card is actually very silent, and I'll go into that in just a bit. In terms of inputs, you've got DisplayPort, HDMI 2.0 and DVI-D, which are the standard ports that you'd require for any sort of modern day monitor. The graphics card needs a 6-pin power connector from your PSU. That is quite good as it allows overclocking. And no, I didn't do any sort of overclocking for that matter, because obviously overclocking depends on every single chip. It's always different. But it's good the fact that you've got that extra power. If you want to overclock it, therefore overvolt or whatnot, you can do so. Through this model, overclocking is quite easy. In fact, most graphics cards nowadays are quite easy to overclock. Anyway, apart from that, I would like to say that in comparison to the GTX 960, which I currently have in my PC, and that's the go-to graphics card that I've got, and the reason behind that is because I just play Counter-Strike, so I don't need anything more powerful. It is a shorter card, which is quite nice because the 1050 Ti is really a replacement of the 960. So it's very much nice to see a smaller factor card, and you'll see soon that its benchmarks are very much similar as well. So it's very nice to see that from MSI. And you'd also probably want to see how it looks like in terms of specs. The model I got, and this is a screenshot from GPU-Z, ran at 1354 megahertz with a boost of 1468 megahertz. And as you can see right there, the memory size is 4096, which is 4GB of VRAM. As I said, you can get the 2GB VRAM model as well. Now this runs on the GP107 chip. So there we go. That's all the specs that you're going to need. If you need any more, you can see the screenshot of GPU-Z. And I'll obviously link down in the description below more specs straight to the MSI's website. So now you might be wondering, how does it perform? And that is very much the most important thing, because benchmarks are all that really matter. In these benchmarks, all of which were done at 2560 times 1440, that means it's really pushing out the card. And the reason I say this is because the 1050 Ti is not really made for that sort of resolution. Despite me using a 960 at that resolution, I would say that if you want solid 60 FPS or 144 FPS gameplay, you should be really gaming at 1080p using this card. If you want to run at 2K solidly, then you might want to be looking up for an upgrade version. For example, the 1070 would be a great version, card for that. Now, look at synthetic benchmarks first. Heaven 4.0. You can see the 1050 Ti very much sits at the bottom right there, very close to the 680 and very close to the 960. They're very, very close together, to the point that the differences over here are so minimal. Even though I ran each test 3 times on each card, so that's quite a lot of tests in there, it still shows that the difference is very minimal. So the fact that you're seeing like a 5 FPS difference, you probably won't notice that in game. Actually, I guarantee you won't notice that in a game or anything like that. So as you can see through synthetic benchmarks like Heaven, all the scores are very similar, almost at the same level. Moving on to Valley benchmark, which is also a synthetic benchmark. Again, the same sort of thing, so the same sort of case was here as well. The 1050 Ti performing very close to the 960 and the 680. Always found in between of the two. Now, what you might be more interested in is the Battlefield 4 benchmark. I don't have Battlefield 1, unfortunately, and Battlefield 4 is a benchmark I use on the other cards as well, so it's a kind of fair comparison. And you can see over here that yet again, the 1050 Ti performs pretty much identical to the 960 or the 680. It was quite interesting that versus the 680, which yes, it is quite a few generations back, but maybe some people have it and are thinking of upgrading, you can see the minimum FPS is a significant boost. And I say significant, it is about a 10 odd FPS, well, just under 10 FPS boost, and that makes a lot of difference. You might be surprised, especially if you're going to be running at 1080p. As I said, these were running at 2560 times 1440, and the only thing that was disabled was anti-aliasing, because if you're playing at 2K, you're not going to need anti-aliasing, at least in my opinion. So anyway, the benchmarks pretty much speak for themselves. If you want to be gaming solidly at 60 FPS or even 120 FPS, you really have to be gaming at 1080p. This is not really an ideal card for mainstream AAA titles running at 2K, in other words 2560 times 1440. Now, what I found interesting on this is the fact that fan speed was very, very low, just like the 960 was, and very much more impressive than the 680, which was quite a few generations before. The fan speed was only 32%, meaning that it was very, very, very silent. And this also reflected in terms of its temperatures. The temperatures were similarly quite low, at 68 centigrade, running Battlefield for about an hour or so. Very much impressed at that centigrade, nowhere near its thermal threshold or thermal throttling. So very good job by MSI, and generally the architecture behind it from NVIDIA, I was very much impressed. Another thing which is a compliment to its architecture is its power draw. Extremely, extremely low, to the point that I thought something was wrong with my voltage watt meter. At full load, when using playing Battlefield 4, I only I got less than 200. It was about 170 odd watts drawn from the wall, and that's including my whole system, by the way, not just the GPU. In comparison, if you take like the 1070, you've got near 300 watts of usage. If you take the MSI 960, you've got 233 watts usage. So it is watts might not mean so much to a lot of people, but the fact that it's so much more efficient really just shows us how the architecture has worked so far. Even on idle on Windows, it was drawing less than 70 watts. So very, very impressive with the power draw, and I must say very impressed, just generally speaking, of the card itself in terms of its efficiency. So now let's go into the conclusion. Would I recommend the GTX 1050 Ti by MSI? Well, looking at its performance, I would say that if you're upgrading from an old GPU, you must make sure that that GPU wasn't in line with the 1050 Ti. Because in my opinion, 1050 Ti brings better power, much better power efficiency, a much better a quiet gaming experience, and a smaller form factor which might fit in other smaller cases. But apart from that, in terms of raw performance goes, you're not going to see much of a difference versus a 680, which is very, very old, respectively speaking, and a 960, which is what I have. Would I be upgrading? No, I wouldn't, because I don't see a sort of difference in terms of performance. And even then, the 960 was a fantastic card in terms of being quite silent, and it was reasonably cheap. And that brings up the issue of price. Now, the price has dropped since the previous generation. When I reviewed the 960, I think it was around 175, 180 odd pounds. There's a slightly cheaper card, which makes it a little bit more affordable, but nevertheless, there's always AMD as a competition. And taking MSI just as their own brand, if I look at the MSI RX 470 Gaming X4G, that also has 4GB VRAM, but the RX 470 is leagues above a 1050 Ti. In other words, if you're looking for a budget card of under £200, let's say under £170 to be more precise, then the RX 470 is a much better buy in all sort of respects. Obviously, you're looking at AMD versus NVIDIA here and drivers and things like that, but if you're looking for performance, then the RX 470 just makes much more sense to buy. Don't get me wrong, the 1050 Ti is a fantastic card for what it does, and it's great in order for a budget solution. I would have just liked it to be, say, £150 or something, or £130. It'd make it even more sort of easy product to recommend. But nevertheless, if you're looking for an NVIDIA budget card, then 1050 Ti does a fantastic job all round at 1080p resolution, as in 1920 by 1080. You can game solidly at 60 plus FPS on that. Anyway guys, hopefully you've enjoyed this review. Make sure you like, comment and subscribe. Definitely let me know in the comments below if you think the 1050 Ti is worth it over the RX 470, sorry. I highly doubt you will, but just let me know anyway. And more than anything, do favourite and share, as it always helps the channel grow. Alright guys, I've been totally dubbed. Take care and bye bye.